Brah, y'all already know what it is. Your boy Yaakov, what it do? The outlet to reality, the holdest podcast in Vegas and Chicago. What up? This is the place where you want to hide from your drama or maybe hide from your baby mama. Aha, just kidding. But anyways, fans, thank you for staying tuned. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Cha-ching! And today we have a very special guest, one of the biggest rabbis right here from the Kollel, and also has his own podcast. Give it up for Rabbi Meth. How's it going?
Good, thank God. Good to see you. What's going on?
Oh, doing good, Baruch Hashem. I'm so happy to have you. It's an honor. You don't understand. And for those who don't know, Rabbi Meth, I've been to a lot of his shiurs, and he does a lot of events for the Kollel in Vegas, and it's a wonderful thing, a great way to connect with other Jews and grow and learn Torah. And yesterday, I had one of the best classes for the first time with Rabbi Meth. It was a bunch of young kids. I mean, we're not kids anymore, but we're adults, like in our mid-20s. And it was so nice that, you know, Rabbi Meth, he gave the story of like the history of how important it is to study Talmud. And Rabbi Meth, I'm going to share a little bit what I remember from what you taught me yesterday. See how good my memory is.
This is a test.
Big test.
You paying attention?
Right. You let me know. So one thing Rabbi Meth said that was so beautiful, he said, the Talmud is not a code of law. And he breaks it down that we have the Mishnah and Gemara, and it has to do with a lot of commentaries, dialogue, and many things that can be very complicated in the Torah, like a pasuk. And one thing that was amazing that I remember was when the Gutenberg came out with the printing press. Daniel Bomber was the one who basically made copies of the Talmud, and it was big. And the crazy thing where he got me with the right hook, I did not know he was not Jewish.
Yeah, it's a great story. We were talking about just in our class yesterday. We were talking about the Talmud in general, why Jews study the Talmud. We're the people of the book, and why the Talmud is so important. We spoke a lot about, you know, those ideas and those elements, and what the Talmud is, what it isn't, what it's trying to accomplish, and how it fits in Judaism in general. And then we started talking about a little bit of the history of the actual book itself. The Talmud is very long. It's the standard edition of the Talmud. You can actually see my bookshelf over there, that red volume back there takes up an entire shelf. That's one edition of the Talmud, and that's a standard classic edition. And just part of the history, the Talmud was redacted or compiled in the ballpark year 440 of the Common Era. And back then there was no printing press. So the way the Talmud was preserved, you had to write that whole thing by hand, and that was a big deal. And when Gutenberg invents the printing press, you know, the Jews are the first to really take advantage, because we really are the people of the book. So of the first books that were printed were actually volumes of the Talmud. And we were talking about at the class yesterday, it's a remarkable story, is that there was a publishing house, I believe in Italy, with a fellow named Daniel Bomberg, who had a publishing company, and he published the Talmud. And there are letters that go back and forth between great rabbis living in Europe, talking about how wonderful this is that we've got the Talmud is able to be published with this new thing called the printing press. And we're so thankful and appreciative of Rabbi Daniel Bomberg for, you know, leading this initiative. Them thinking Daniel Bomberg is a very Jewish sounding name, but the truth is he wasn't a Jewish guy at all, and that just happened to be his name. And he was taking advantage in a conniving kind of way, but it was an economic opportunity. Go publish the Talmud, a bunch of Jews will buy it, and made a buck. So, and you can get your hands on, I mean, it's hard to get your hands on a copy of the Bomberg Talmud, but they do exist. And every now and again, You'll see them in like auction houses like Sotheby's. They go for millions and millions and millions of dollars. But we've got it going back, well into back to the 1500s. It's amazing.
Wow, Rabbi. Yeah, it's so beautiful how, all, Kol Yisrael, all the Jews are able to preserve the Talmuds for so long, even though it was burned down from during the Crusades, and we were able to still cherish it and pass it on to generation. I think that's what makes our culture, our traditions so strong, because we were able to preserve it through turmoil.
Yeah, and it's something that I think about. I try to think about all the time. Is I study Talmud on a regular basis every day. I try to study a little bit, and when we talk about the Talmud, oftentimes we think about how big it is. Its width. It's just so many volumes, as you can see. But don't be fooled. It's not just that it's so wide. It's also really, really deep. It's miles and miles deep. Just the analysis and the thinking that goes behind every step within the Talmud is really remarkable. And one of the things that's really, really cool when you talk about the Talmud is when you study the Talmud, especially when you start getting into the depth of what's going on, you're really part of a conversation that's thousands of years old, that spans continents, literally. So, for example, I might be studying a passage in the Talmud, and think about just the history and geography. Well, that goes back to the 5th century Babylonia. Well, I'm not just studying the Talmud, I'm also going to be studying the commentary of Rashi. So that's 11th century France. But I'm not just studying Rashi, who's commenting on the Talmud. I'm going to be studying the comment that Tosfos, writing in 12th century Germany, what he says about Rashi. And I'm not just studying Tosfos, I might then study the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, written in 15th century, 16th century, northern Israel. And I'm not just stopping there. I then might read the commentary of, I don't know, Pnei Yoshua in 7th century Poland. And it just keeps on going on. And then it doesn't end there. Oh, I'm going to end, and read the opinion of, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, writing in 19th century Ukraine. And now here I am in Las Vegas in the 21st century, and you're a part of this conversation, this dialogue, and we're all discussing the same conversation, just layer after layer after layer. And we literally just went back, more than 1,600 years and, thousands and thousands of miles. And these were real people. These weren't just any old people. These were the leaders and heroes of the Jewish people throughout the ages. When Jews, got home from their, hard day of work, whether it was, today, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, what did they do? They pulled out a copy, an edition of the Talmud, and they studied it together by themselves, with, a friend, with a rabbi, with a group. That's what Jews do, is we study, and it's really a beautiful thing. It's amazing.
Oh, Rabbi, that's totally like so inspiring, and I gotta say, Rabbi, studying so many years, and being a rabbi, I bet you had to learn so much to take your test, and I heard it's an oral test, it's a long test, so a rabbi, learning a little bit about you, like one of my friends, Joshua, who he was telling me how your background, a lot of your family are Hasidic and very ultra Orthodox, and it's amazing how you became this rabbi, which is amazing. I want to know more of your story, your little background.
So it's great. It's we all have our stories, right? So my grandfather of blessed memory was a Hasidic Jew. He was born in Poland, and he looked the part, the whole Hasidic, garb and look. And he was born in a small town in north of Krakow, in Poland. And when World War II broke out, and the Nazis came, he lost everything. His parents were killed. Most of his siblings were killed. And somehow he was able to survive the war. They may have taken everything away from him, but they didn't take his spirit. And when my grandfather came to the United States, a lot of Jews after the Holocaust, they were angry at the world, they were angry at God, and I get it. Like it's so easy or it's so understandable how someone could just be broken and bitter. That wasn't my grandfather, interestingly, thankfully. My grandfather, obviously was devastated, but he didn't blame his Judaism. He didn't blame God. He didn't have self-pity or play the role of the victim. He embraced his Judaism and he embraced God, and that was something he passed over to his children, my dad of blessed memory as well. That said, he was now in the United States of America. He became a businessman, and like the whole Hasidic external approach, if you've ever seen Hasidic Jews with the long beards and the hats and all that, that was who he was on the inside, but on the outside, it didn't lend itself for him. That was a choice that he decided he wasn't going to kind of do that part. He was going to kind of look a little bit more Americanized, but in terms of his attitudes, beliefs, and lifestyle, that's who he was till the day he died. He passed, about 15 years ago. But I was sort of the product of, my dad, who, again, had a lot of those Hasidic values and was a devoutly observant Jew, but I wouldn't call him like Hasidic in the sense, if you ever look up like a Satmar Hasidic Jew in Borough Park or Williamsburg in New York, they have a very clear external persona that they put on. That wasn't so much my dad. And I just, the way God kind of navigated my life, I ended up in a non-Hasidic yeshiva, so obviously I don't look very Hasidic, but my heart still connects to a lot of Hasidic ideology and values. But for the most part, that's not really what I study and practice, but it's definitely a part of my cherished family history.
Wow, that's beautiful, Rabbi. Is amazing, and to see that you still keep that legacy, you still buy, and you're like a leader, because a lot of young people, we look up to you. You're always in a good mood, and I gotta be honest, everybody, when I see Rabbi Meth, getting ready for the event, he always has a nice suit and the nicest clean one's white shoes, the best outfit. I'm like, man, this guy has young and old soul. Like, I love it. He's ready for for big crowds, and he's ready to look good. So I love the combination. I think that's amazing, Rabbi. And Rabbi, what inspired you to start your podcast?
So it's a great question. Every one of us, it's an amazing thing the Talmud tells us is. It's a really an amazing thing. You look at there, what is it now? 7.5 billion people on Earth. Hard to know exactly, but billions and billions of people on Earth. Everyone looks different. We all have a different face, even identical twins. You can tell them apart. Give it enough time. People are all different. The Talmud tells us that's not by mistake. God is telling us that Bishvili Nivra Olam. God is telling. All have to find our individual talents, strengths, passions, and not try to be the next guy, but try to be the best us, the best me. That's really an important message that the Talmud teaches us, that we're so important. One of the things that, and everyone has different skills and different passions and different, loves. I love a couple of things. One of them is my Judaism, and the other thing is stories. I love stories. I love American history in specific because I just view it as a bunch of stories. I don't view American history as a boring subject that you got tortured by your teacher in high school. I view history, and not just history, but anything of interest. I see the world as a bunch of stories. And I love seeing the lessons and stories around us and connecting them to the teachings that the Torah provides for us. The Torah is, as we talked about earlier, it's so deep, it's so profound, it has so many lessons in it. And those lessons are not just like archaic or irrelevant. They're so enriching and they're so alive and they're so germane in 2022 in North America, in Las Vegas. It's like they speak to us. You just have to be able to extract it and apply it. And that's something that I've always been fascinated by, is taking a Torah idea, exploring a message or a lesson or a profound value that the Torah teaches us, and seeing, yeah, by the way, you see it right here in this story about Andrew Jackson, about Bo Jackson, about, I don't know, anything under the sun, and sort of seeing that connection is something that I love. That's part of my individuality, is being able to take my passion for Judaism and my passion for a good story and crashing them into one another. And and I've always been a storyteller. I love sharing stories and I love being inspired by stories. And my kids used to always joke, I'd be sitting down at the dinner table, and like literally every night I say, guys, I got to tell you the best story ever. And I would go and tell them, some story that I just read or came across. And I would say that ad nauseum, like every day I got the best story ever. And my kids at a certain point, they roll their eyes, not disrespectfully, they're like, Daddy, you say that about every single story, that it's the best story ever. And then one day we're like, you know what, I should really put out a podcast. And we're like thinking about what should we name it? My kids are like, well, of course, best story ever. So that's my podcast. It's available wherever you find your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Google, all those places. You could also check it out on our Kollel's website, lasvegaskollel.org. If you want to watch them in video format, it's on Facebook. If you look on the Las Vegas Kollel's Facebook page, or you just search on Facebook for best story ever, you'll see, I think we now have 62 episodes. So they're like short stories. I try to keep it about 8 minutes long. A story, a Torah idea, how it explains the story, and that's that. That's kind of how I got into it.
Wow, that's amazing. And I remember when I first met you a while back for a men's it was like a men's hangout, a men's event, and you were there and you were like, I have a podcast. And I said, me too, Rabbi. And we were like two peas in the pod. You know, we got to make it happen. So I think it's so nice that I finally was able to have you, Rabbi, because you don't know how hard it is. And I'm so happy. This means so much. And I gotta say, Rabbi, I'm from Chicago, and coming to Vegas and coming to the Kollel, it was one of the best experience for me to feel like this welcoming family, because right away, where I'm from in Chicago, it's very different. If they don't know you, it's hard to basically kind of be accepted. Usually, the first question they'll ask you, is your mom Jewish? And if you're not Jewish, you're like, oh, but here is so different. Like when I came in, and Rabbi Frummer was already my rabbi, so it was a nice transition, because he introduced me to everybody in the shul, everyone that's so involved, like Rabbi Goldman, Rabbi Katenik. Everybody has this like very they have a lot of chesed, a lot of kindness, and I think it's beautiful, because especially like I'm at this stage, growing up, when I was young in Chicago, I was very involved in the yeshivas. I was very religious. And right now, at this stage of my life, I'm trying to get back into that rhythm. I'm trying to, go back. But they say you have to go slow, because if you rush into the things, to be more, of course, everyone, when they hear and learn about mitzvot, they want to do it, but you have to go slow. You can't rush it. And I think this is definitely a second, I would say it's a safe haven for me to escape my reality, to if I want to go daven and just concentrate and be with a lot of positive people, this is the place.
It's an interesting thing. We all have our own journey and path in life. And there are many, many ways to achieve greatness. I always, as an example, take Judaism out of it. Two of my favorite characters personalities in American history: George Washington, Harry Truman, two presidents, and they are, in my opinion, of the greatest men to have ever, been in the White House. If you look at their trajectory, how they got to where they were, I mean, you couldn't pick two farther and more opposite approaches. Washington was born into wealth. He became, the lieutenant in an army, and really was a significant person in the French and Indian War. He then became the general of the army in the American Revolution. He then became, the person who presided over the Continental Congress. And it was like this like upward trajectory to becoming the president of the United States of America, and the rest is history. And it was like this very linear upward approach, and he looked the part. If George Washington walked into the room, you'd be like, and you didn't know who he was, you would have been like, that guy's going to be president one day, right? That was Washington's trajectory. Truman, totally different guy, came out of nowhere. He was a failure for the first half of his life. When he was 33, he had, he was a captain in the army. That was as high as he got. He was a failed farmer. He was, afterwards he went into business where he went broke and he went bankrupt. He was a nobody. At 50 years old, he finds his way into politics. Next thing you know, he becomes a judge in his local county judge. He ends up, by total luck and fortune, becomes a senator. That came out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, they decided almost by mistake he'd become the vice president. Roosevelt dies. Next thing you know, Harry Truman's the president of the United States of America. If you bumped into Harry Truman, you would think he's your next door neighbor. He was, and I've always loved those two examples. As you see, there are different paths in life to get to greatness, and we all have the potential for greatness, and we're all unique and we're all different. And Chicago to Vegas, and I'm from Maryland. I lived in New York, and now here. We all have our different journey. We all have our different paths, and that's great. And that's something we need to celebrate and embrace. And especially out here in a town like Las Vegas, no one from Las Vegas is from Las Vegas. We're all from somewhere else, right? Nobody here is from Vegas.
Oh man!
So we got to rely on one another, and our friends become our family. And we got to have, we all have that a little bit. Out here, out west, we have a little bit more of a pioneering attitude and spirit, but which means we got to really connect with one another, and become friends with and family with people from different backgrounds. And it's one of the things I love about Vegas is you just meet people with such different backgrounds than what you might be used to.
Yeah. Verse, that's 100%. And Rabbi, I gotta ask you something really, really question for you, right? This parsha that just passed, for last, it was very interesting because Lot, when he was in Sodom and Gomorrah, it's very interesting thing is that, Abraham, greeted the men, right? The three men. But in the Torah, when we get to Lot, it's angels, malachim. So it's interesting how it shifts. And I always was curious, Rabbi, why did it change their adjectives?
Yeah, it's interesting. If I recall, I think Rashi even alludes to that. I actually happen to have a copy of the Chumash here. I think one of the commentaries raises that when they initially appear to Avraham, they're men, but when it's with Lot, they're in the guise of angels. Rashi says earlier they're called men, but when they arise to Lot, they're called angels. So one of Rashi's explanations is Avram was he was a great person, and they're described as men, as if to say it's a way of saying this was an ordinary experience for Avram. He was such a great person, an angel popping over and visiting him. That's just like any other guy. But for Lot, this was an unusual experience. So it highlights that how unusual it is. So therefore, it highlights that they're called angels. If you actually look, here's a shameless plug for my podcast. My last edition, we I think it's in last week's, 2 weeks ago, we talked about this idea of familiarity. When we get so, Avram was used to seeing angels. Lot, not so much. So the Torah highlights it. And we talked about that idea of, we get used to things. We take things for granted. Avram here doesn't, but for all of us, it can become very easy for us to look at amazing things and just not be inspired because they're so ordinary and they're so routine. And that's one of the things that we really need to do is be amazed by the world around us. Nothing is ordinary. Nothing is simple,
Wow. No, that's beautiful, Rabbi. It's true. I think sometimes we get caught up with life where we get worried. Maybe I don't have enough food to feed, my fellow, neighbor or whoever. And I think, Avram, he always was positive. He always, there's a midrash that I just read that said that when Avram had a guest over, that they would eat by the tree. And it says if the person was good, his heart was good, the tree would cover both of them from the sun and like kind of give them some shade, and it would grow beautiful. But if the person was wicked, the tree wouldn't grow. It would kind of just stay there. And it's an interesting concept because I feel like, many people that come into your life, right? Sometimes they may feel alone. They may not have, a place to eat. And maybe you're that one person that could change your life, right? Maybe it's a Shabbat meal. And there you can tell sometimes when you're at shul and there's somebody just standing around looking up and it's time to go. Everyone's leaving from the shul, right? And you could tell sometimes you could spot like, man, this brother probably needs a meal for Shabbat. And sometimes you have to act on it. Like, hey, do you have a place to stay for Shabbat or do you want to come over? And I feel like, Avraham, like you said, he was the best when it came down to hospitality. And we can learn from that.
It's an amazing thing is if I were to ask you, what's the most addictive thing in the world? What's the most addictive thing in the world?
I don't know.
What would you say?
I would say it's caffeine, but I could be
caffeine.
wrong.
Okay. I'm a coffee drinker. It's funny. I was just doing coffee with a buddy of mine today, and I was telling him, people think I'm a big coffee drinker. And I told him, said, people think I'm a coffee snob. I said, it's not true. Like I need my fancy coffee. I said, I'm not a coffee snob. I'm a coffee addict. Those are two different things. I don't care what kind of coffee I have, but if I don't have a cup of coffee, I will kill you. Those are two. So coffee, caffeine, crack cocaine. Is that the most addictive thing in the world? Heroin, alcohol, drugs. What the most addictive, any psychologist will tell you, the most addictive thing in the world is human connection. We have to have human connection. God created all of us with a desperate need to be connected. Conversely, one of the most painful feelings is loneliness. When we don't feel that we have connection, it's of the most painful things in the world. And we are hardwired, to crave and seek connection. And Avraham might, he talks about, taking care of other people's physical needs. But Avraham understood deeper than that is we also have to take care of people's emotional needs and be able to connect, feel that sense of belonging, that sense of connection with other people. It's so, so important. Thank God we live in a world today where we don't have to really worry, in terms of taking care of people's physical needs. Is there poverty around us? Of course there is. And we need to help people out. And if someone's hungry, God forbid, let's get them food. But thank God I don't think that's like a challenge that many of us encounter, at least in our day-to-days. I'm walking down the street, in my neighborhood. I'm not bumping into people that are hungry, that don't have a roof over their head or need clothing. Although there are plenty of people in our world that need that, and we need to be sensitive to that. But if I think about the people who are closest to me in my life, most of them, even if they're struggling financially, they got a roof over their head, they got food, they're not literally starving. That's not a huge challenge that I encounter, at least. Again, although there are plenty of people that I know that are struggling. But you know what everyone struggles with? Wealthy, poor, healthy, everyone struggles with that sense of belonging, that sense of, am I valued? Do I have that connection with other people? And we should keep that in mind. We talk about chesed, about kindness, about being, kind to other people. It doesn't just mean handing out peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, to the homeless, although that's a beautiful mitzvah. We can also, really what people need is feelings of connection. That, hey, I value you. Let's go do a cup of coffee. You're my friend. Let's get together. And to embrace one another just with friendship, that's the most powerful acts of kindness that we can do, especially in society today where it's so divisive, where it's so easy. We all hate one another because if I don't like your political opinion and I don't like him, he doesn't like that. And we all, Republican, Democrat, Trump, Biden, everyone's yelling at one another. And, not to minimize the issues, they're important issues that as a society we have to deal with, but to recognize kindness means I care about one another. People, I understand that need that people have for connection, and I want to provide that friendship, that connection with anyone and everyone, no matter their background, political affiliation, religious background. I'm going to be nice to my, to the guy next door. That's the greatest mitzvah of the greatest mitzvahs we can be doing.
I love that, Rabbi. Thank you. It was very, very powerful, very moving. You got me thinking too. And I do have to wrap it up. Guys, this is the Outlet to Reality, the holdest podcast in Vegas and Chicago every Tuesday. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Ching! And you know where to find me. I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, the Outlet to Reality. My TikTok is at Yaakov28, and my Snapchat is Take One Pass It. And Rabbi Meth, thank you again for being here. And where can my fans find you?
You can find us anywhere where you get your podcasts. Look for Best Story Ever, or check us out at LasVegasKollel.org, or find me on Facebook, Nachum Meth, Nachum Meth.